Welcome back to another video, guys. Today we're going to be talking about soldering. This is episode 1 of the fundamentals series I'm going to be doing, and today basically is just going to be about teaching you what you need to solder, how to get started, and make sure that even if you know how, that you're doing it properly so you have no issues and you can have a very easy time soldering your jewelry going forward. So let's begin here by talking about some of the things we need. So I always use a file. You can use a file or you can use some sandpaper. I'm gonna have some scrap sterling silver here to use. And the reason for the file and this sandpaper is because when you're soldering, you have two joints coming together and you gotta make sure that the ends of each joint are just perfectly clean and flush so that when they connect, the solder will flow perfectly and you won't have any issues with solder flowing. Now, you're also gonna need some flux. Now, I know a lot of people haven't seen it like this, but this is essentially just a dish with a stick of flux. So you put some water in here, you mix it around, and then you've got your flux ready to go. And I like using this over a pre-made flux because I can regulate how much I want to make, and this stick will last you forever. So you can get this on Amazon, Rio Grande, some different places, but if you're going to be doing a lot of jewelry, highly recommend it. It'll last you a long time and works really well. So let's get into it. So you guys just saw the piece of silver I had. I cut it in half, and what we're going to do for today is just solder it back the way it was before. Forgot to mention, you're also going to need a torch. I just use a handheld. This Blazer from Rio Grande works great for me. And you're also going to need either a charcoal block or some kind of a block that you can solder on. I may even use these third hands here, and what these do are they allow me to hold the silver where I want it without actually having to hold it, so I can focus on soldering. And if you're going to be doing a lot of work in the future, it helps a ton to have those. So what we want to start off with is making sure that the ends are flush, and I'm going to do that with the file. And all I'm going to do is have it against my bench pin right here. Not sure if that's focused in or not. And make sure that I'm holding it flush and just slowly work it so that I can make sure that end is nice and square. Now what this also does, even if you had an old piece of silver and it was perfectly flush on the end, what you're going to want to do is either use a little piece of sandpaper like this or the file and just clean off the end that you're going to be soldering. And the reason for this is that the solder will not flow properly when the silver is dirty or tarnished. So being able to go over it with a file or go over it with some sandpaper will just ensure that it's clean and flush, so that way when you solder it, you'll have no issues with the solder flowing. Because I can tell you from my experience, I have had some times where I'm making a piece of jewelry and I just neglected to clean it properly and the solder just beads, it won't flow, and all kinds of issues can come of that. So make sure when you're doing your solder that both of the joints are extremely clean. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to mix up our flux. Just pour a little bit of water in there, put a little bit too much, stir it around. Don't have to go too crazy with it. Just like so. Have your brush ready. And as you can see here, I have my piece laid out the way I want it to be soldered. And I'm going to zoom in on this for you here just so you can get a better idea. Now, all we're going to do, take a little bit of flux. Sometimes you have to fiddle with it a little bit. And what we're going to use today is some, what is it, right here, some Rio Grande easy solder, just for demonstrational purposes. And what I like to do, this is some old solder. I'm going to go back out here a bit. And I like to take the end of the solder. I'm not sure if you can see that there or not. And I like to take some sandpaper and I like to clean off the solder just to make sure that it's not tarnished, we have no issues with it. Make sure it flows properly. Just give it a little bit of a scrub. And then I take my flush cutters and I just cut a little piece of solder off. Sometimes I'll take 2 pieces just in case one of them flies off with the heat. And then I'll take my torch and I'll just heat up where I put the flux. That way when the flux bubbles, I don't have any issues with it moving the solder that I have placed on there. So now what I'm going to do is just take my solder and put it on here. I like to use the paintbrush sometimes, or I'll use my solder pick. Once it's on, I can kind of move it so that it's exactly where I want it to be. And just go back and move your piece however you need it to. So there. Let me zoom in here for you guys. Hopefully you can see that all right. So basically, I'll point it out. I put the flux on the seam that I'm going to be soldering in the middle. Then I took the little bead of solder and I placed it where I want it to be. And once the flux has been heated up, all the bubbles are gone. So now when I reheat it to melt the solder, I'm going to have no issues and it'll just melt and solder these two together perfectly. So we're going to do that right now. And when you're doing this, you have to take into consideration whether you're using easy, medium, or hard solder, because depending on what the solder is, you're going to have to heat the metal up more. And I do this just by feel, by sight, where I can see how the metal is heating up and I can see when the solder is going to flow. And you get a feel for it over time, but with easy solder, you don't have to heat it up much, and you'll see that once it's at a certain temperature, the solder will flow and then you're good to go. Alright, so when you're starting off soldering, just keep the flame nice and low and just slowly heat around the material. You want it to heat up all at the same time, nice and even, and if you have too strong of a flame right off the bat, it can make the solder fall off of the piece that you're soldering. So just work the torch around the whole piece, get it nice and warm, and when you're actually soldering, you're not melting the solder, you're heating up the piece to a certain temperature that melts the solder, because it's the metal that the solder is on, the silver, that actually melts it and causes it to flow. So you can see here the metal's starting to heat up. The solder just started to flow, and there we go. Just saw that the solder was flowing properly, and so I want to explain what happened here. If you could see that, the solder was flowing right here and it was staying on this side of the piece. So what I had to do is bring the flame over to this side where it was not hot enough, and then the solder jumped over and it fused the two pieces together. It connected the two. When one side of your work is not hot enough, it's gonna go to the other side that is hot enough, which was this side. So I had to heat this piece of silver up enough so that the solder would flow over to this and run onto this piece. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now, what you want to do once you have this done is put it into a solution called pickle. And you can get this, you can get it on Amazon, you can get it on Rio Grande, but it's a powder that you can get. Sometimes it's pre-mixed, but it's a powder you mix with warm water, and what it does is it takes this tarnish and it takes the heated flux off of this piece so that then you can sand it and polish it and continue working as normal. So we're going to do that, and then we'll come back here and I'll show you what I like to do to clean up my solder. Alright, so we got it out of the pickle now. As you can see, it took off some of the discoloration and the solder seam worked out perfect. It's back to being one piece. So for anyone that's curious, this is the pickle that I use here. I think I just ordered this one on Amazon. Works really well. It doesn't have to be anything specific. But what I like to do after I get that out of the pickle is I'll take some sandpaper to it and just kind of clean it up a little bit. Bring back some of the shine, because after you work with it, put the silver through heat, and you have the flux on it, it does tarnish a bit, a bit of discoloration. And then you can see here, hopefully you can see in the middle where I soldered, there is a little bit of a mark. So I like to go over it, and this is with any piece of jewelry I make. Go over it with a nice fine file, and that way it just cleans off any of the bump or any of the solder that's still not quite clean and flush to the metal. So you can see here now, you can't tell where it was soldered, and that's how it's supposed to be. If you do it correctly and you have both ends of the silver flush and the solder flows perfectly, you won't be able to tell where the joint is, and that's the ideal. So hopefully this helped you guys out. This is only the first video of the series. I'm gonna try and give you guys some other tips and advice and do some other videos of just the fundamentals that'll help you out and progress you through making jewelry. And even if you are experienced in making jewelry, maybe I'll be able to say it in a different way or give you some tip that can help you if you have a struggle with anything. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and looking forward to seeing you in the next video.